Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and with the news that Johnson is preparing to announce some much tougher restrictions on Monday, it seems that the Chancellor Rishi Sunak has had to go back on his insistence that furlough will not be extended, even in a targeted way, to areas most in need. In this video, what I want to do is to take a look at the furlough scheme, what it's cost so far, and how the government have got no right to say that they cannot afford to extend it further. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Boris Johnson seems set to announce lockdowns in parts of the country at least, weeks after he should have done, or he should have taken some action at any rate, in order to prevent the situation that we've got now. That, of course, is going to mean businesses are going to have to close, not necessarily all businesses. The rumours are that pubs in large parts of the north of England will be told to shut their doors again, though the suggestion is that restaurants won't. But I don't need to speculate on that. We'll find out the details tomorrow. What is known is that something major is going to be announced, and it's going to be big. Now, that means income support is going to be needed for lots of workers in the hospitality industry at the very least. The Chancellor has resisted moves to extend furlough, even in a targeted way, for weeks. That was always been asked for. Look, there's certain sections of the economy, still cannot get up to speed. They need help, targeted help. It's not a blanket help, targeted. And, and Labour, of course, and the SNP have been calling consistently for that to happen, as well as other opposition parties, of course. We can't afford it, said Sunak. And this argument may well work on some people who don't actually check the maths out. But the more curious might say, well, if other countries can afford it, comparable countries with us, such as Germany, why can't we afford it? Began Sunak. I'll tell you what, he said when faced with hundreds of thousands suddenly about to find themselves unemployed. And, this is also crucial, millions more in such fear of their jobs that even if they don't ultimately lose them, they could feel they could lose them any time. What does that do? It means that people in that situation do not spend their excess cash, their disposable income. They keep hold of it in case they need it, which means that you're not spending it in the shops. That further depresses the economy. That's no good for a Chancellor. So, we'll offer some support along the lines of Germany's Kurzarbeit system. Of course, the support was weak. It was a very weak copy of it. Another political distraction that would not prevent mass unemployment, the likes of which we haven't seen in decades. It was better than nothing, but not as good as it should have been. But the curiouser still may want to look at the figures. So, we have apparently spent £47 billion so far on job retention schemes. That still translates into much less money than has been given to business owners as well. Because in terms of the money used to prop up the economy, some money used to pay wages, or part pay wages, a lot of other money for... And I'm not saying businesses didn't need some money as well. What I want to know is, how come business owners needed way more money than all of the workers in the country that were affected? Was it at its peak something like 12 million people? 9 to 12 million people, I think, something like that. But anyway, apparently, this is so unaffordable to continue with. I mean, it sounds like a lot. 47 billion is a lot of money, isn't it? But billions always sound like a lot. But should we have a look at some other sums that have been spent? So, classic case, we've so far spent £12 billion on the tracing programme. Track and trace, they call it. Hate that term. Doesn't track mean the same as trace? What is the difference between the track element and the trace element? Also, they call it NHS, track and trace, and the NHS got nothing to do with it. Now, if I just say, this is a bag of crap, we wasted £12 billion on it, where despite needing to contact people within 48 hours to be effective of the positive test, quite a lot of people are not even being added to the system for people to contact them for days, sometimes a week or more. But you might say, well, yes, okay, it's been crap, but we've had some use out of it. It has contacted some people and therefore helped. Yes, but has it helped to the tune of £12 billion? Let's have a look at it. There's two ways to look at this. The first way to look at it, as my partner would do, in fact did do, is to note that if you look at the breakdown of how it was spent, that breakdown only adds up to less than £1 billion. Less than £1 billion of that money has been accounted for in terms of the costs of staff, consultants and other obvious expenses. The rest of it, we do not know what it's been spent on. But I mean, let's take the consultants, for example. So part of that sum, we spent £56 million on consultants. Did their consultations make the system better? Not really. No, the system is getting worse. It has consistently got worse since it opened up, missing targets by an ever-increasing margin. Now, this may not be the fault of the consultants. It may well be that they have been offering good advice that has been ignored. But either way, it's been £56 million that's not been well spent. We'd have done better to have spent that money on carrying on feeding people in poverty, which is apparently something else we can't afford to do. But over £11 billion unaccounted for completely. Not just didn't represent good value, but we have no idea what it was spent on. It's been spent, don't know on what. So unless the government would like to update their accounts, that's £11 billion unaccounted for. Sunak hasn't publicly expressed any concern at all about that cost. In fact, there's another way of looking at it, and this is the way I prefer to look at it, because at the point, the figure £12 billion been used. And that's a lot of money. But sometimes the government quote a figure in billions of pounds and it's excessive, like this. Sometimes they quote a figure in billions of pounds and it's nowhere near enough. They're trying to make it sound like it's a lot and it's not. We can't cope with it. We need a figure we can understand. So, according to the official government figures, the latest figures, the tracing system has contacted 547,000 people. So, £12 billion divided by 547,000 means that it's cost about £22,000 per person contacted. Does the average, now that's a number we can cope with, does the average person on the street think that it's a good use of money to spend £22,000 to ring one person up and tell them to isolate? Is that good value for public money? Because that's how things should be phrased, really. I've said it before, overall figures don't mean a lot. £12 billion for a tracing programme, is that a lot? Is it not enough? Don't know. I don't know. Government expenditure always sounds like big sums of money, even when it's not. Break it down into what you get, and people have a better chance of judging whether the money is right or not. Even the average citizen knows it costs nowhere near £22,000 to update a database and ring a number a few times. Then there was the Eat Out to Help Out, which was personally promoted by Rishi Sunak and seemed to help only the virus. Cost another £500 million, just over. Analysis doesn't even show that it helps the restaurants out in the short term. It's not actually saved the industry, and it highlighted an awful lot of fiddling going on in certain restaurants accessing the scheme. Put it this way, an awful lot of that money did not find its way into the pockets of ordinary workers. Again, Sunak doesn't consider that a waste of money, defends that. But with £522 million that could have paid the salaries of nearly half the restaurant workers in the country for the duration of the promotion, it would have been better spent that way. It would have at least meant the money was going to people who desperately needed it, rather than ending up in the pockets of wealthy restaurant chain owners. Okay, now I know there'll be some owners of restaurants, it's not going brilliantly for them. But again, they could have had the help from a furlough scheme in the same way as everyone else. What the Eat Out to Help Out did was actually just boost profits for people. In fact, as of a month ago, the government had spent £210 billion on COVID altogether. Not sure what it's up to at the moment. It takes a little while to get the figures. A maximum of £40 billion on income support, which means £170 billion on other things. That certainly hasn't gone on healthcare. Some of it, as I say, went on propping up businesses as well. Whether that was well spent or not, I don't know. Some of it inevitably would have been needed. I mean, £170 billion, that is more than the entire annual budget for the whole NHS, by some margin. By a massive margin, in fact. If the NHS had actually been given even a fraction of that money, if they'd have been given a tenth of that money extra, we'd have known about it. We'd certainly have had a much better and more efficient testing and tracing system, that is for sure. The fact of the matter is that whether a country can or cannot afford a furlough scheme such as the one we've had to support people in jobs that would be viable without COVID, because that's what we're talking about, viable jobs were it not for COVID and were it not for the government's handling of COVID. And they'll be viable again when we get this under control, whenever that is. That's not a debate to be had when the government has wasted more on private contracts that have not delivered than it's spent on income support. You know, if the government, let's say the government was spending wisely and all the accounts were up to date and we could see exactly where every penny had gone, and we could see that it had gone on things that absolutely were needed, and it was on things at market value, even an inflated market value at the moment for things like PPE. You know, for goods and services, we were paying what we needed to pay. Then a government can argue about whether or not we can afford a furlough scheme. Until then, until they stop wasting tens of billions of money on Tory donors and feckless losers, I personally say that they can afford income support for jobs that are not, they're only not viable because of COVID and because of the government's measures and, you know, their incompetence in tanking our economy. Not due to restrictions, but due to applying restrictions reluctantly and too late. Meaning that our restrictions have to be deeper and last for longer, as we're about to find out for a second time. But the Chancellor, despite this U-turn, is still digging his heels in. He's doing just enough to stave off a rebellion in Parliament. If the government do announce the closure of hospitality venues tomorrow, as is believed, and possibly other parts of the economy as well, they will have to compensate workers. But now the talk is only of paying 2/3 of the wages as opposed to 80%. Now, losing 20% of income was hard enough for the lowest paid workers. What they were getting paid at 100% wasn't enough. And they were the most likely to have been needing furloughed and are the most likely to be hit by the measures that are inevitably going to be announced tomorrow as well. But I suppose it is possible this is just a start, because when you're going in the wrong direction, the U-turn is just the first step. Perhaps then there needs to be political pressure to give him a kick up the arse and get moving back in the right direction, and maybe he'll go further. We'll just have to wait and see. Until then, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.